In our last episode, we were talking a lot about being married and hopefully staying married, but because of that, you might have thought it didn't really apply to you, and maybe it didn't, but good news, this one should. Because now we're talking about being single and finding the one, so please don't go away.
Welcome to the Let's Talk Bible podcast, the podcast about anything related to God, religion, and of course, the Bible.
Well, my kids are here, but the show must go on. Hi everyone, welcome to the Let's Talk Bible podcast. Before we get started, if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, or concerns, you can always find me through the comments of this video on YouTube or through our website for those of you who just listen to the podcast, but on with the show. So I study the Bible, and one of the questions I get every once in a while, and a question I even had at one point is, how do I find the one for me? The person you're going to be spending the rest of your life with. And after years of study, I've come to understand that God isn't too concerned with how you come to be married. God just wants it to work out for you when and if you are. If you look around the world, there are a lot of communities out there that still rely on a degree or variation of an arranged marriage. And the people who get married this way are not less happy, and they are actually less likely to get separated or a divorce. Listen to these statistics. The divorce rate for normal marriages ranges from 40 to 50%. The divorce rate for arranged marriages is between 5 and 10%. Now, one caveat is that in places where marriages are arranged or cultural norms are different, it might be impossible or at least very difficult to get a divorce. So finding exact numbers on something like this is of course impossible, but a 40% difference is also not nothing. Now, for the sake of this episode, when I say arranged marriage, I want to specify that I'm talking about a couple who was brought together either by family, like someone's parents or aunts, uncles, or grandparents, religious overseers who can sometimes have either influence in pairing people or go as far as pairing them directly, but even people who have ended up marrying someone who they went on a blind date with because a friend set them up or because an online algorithm set them up through a dating app or computer program. If they ended up getting married, it's all the same to me. But in all of these cases, what determines whether a marriage is successful or not is the state of mind of the couple going in and their willingness to make the relationship work, aka their willingness to work on the relationship. If the state of mind of the people getting married is, it's my duty to honor my parents' decision or my family's decision, they can make it work. If your heart tells you that your religious leader knows best, then you can make it work. If you trust your friends enough or the dating app you're using, guess what? You can make it work. And if you put some time and energy into any of these relationships, they will be just as magical for just as long. If you didn't listen to the other podcast episode about marriage and divorce, again, because it didn't apply to you, I want to take the analogy about exercise from that episode because I think it's very helpful here too. So it's been pretty well documented that most diet and exercise routines can help most people, but as it turns out, the reason that most diets don't work for people is because the people don't actually stick with them or are just not consistent enough. And it's essentially the same thing with marriage. It really has the potential to work for most people, but you do have to work on it and you do have to be consistent. If you don't want to get married, don't get married. It really depends on your circumstances and your vision for your future. But I'm also not saying do what you want. I'm more referring to people who don't currently feel a physical need to be with someone. At least that's what the Bible says. And more specifically, that's what the Apostle Paul told people very directly when he was saying don't get married. And this is what it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 26 and 27, quote, I suppose, therefore, that this is good because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is, single. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be loosed. Are you loosed from a wife? Do not seek a wife. The point he was making was that there were pains that come with it. And it makes a lot of sense if we frame it using the diet and exercise example. When you're dieting, you have to abstain from certain foods or eat stuff you don't really like as much, and that can be painful. And when you start working out, you might get sore, and that can be painful too. but it's all in exchange for what you want. If you read all of 1 Corinthians chapter 7, you can see Paul's internal struggle on what he could advise everyone at once, since a one-size-fits-all kind of answer for something like this is not that simple. If you want to be healthy or fit, the diet and exercise pains are worth it. If not, that's fine too. If you want a partner and someone to share your life experiences with, the pains that come with marriage are also worth it. But if you don't, that's fine too. My point is, don't be discouraged by what marriage might bring. Your future and your marriage is still in your hands. And of course, I'm not saying that you ought to marry someone at random. The Bible does give us some, if at the very least, vague guidance. It was customary that the people of Israel marry within their own people because they were blood descendants of Abraham. And there was a promise from God that as a group, as a people, they were all trying to keep. The way this guidance applies today is that faithfulness to one God may differ from faithfulness to another God. So the values you have may be different to those of someone who believes in a different God, or at least if they serve or worship that God differently from you. And because faith tends to be very important to those who have it or practice their faith, those differences can be a point of contention if the differences are big enough. So the guidance the Bible gives in this regard is 2 Corinthians 6:14, quote, "Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers," end quote. But even then, I think that the point is to surround yourself with righteousness in marriage and friends. So a difference of this magnitude that has to do with what we believe is right and wrong can be extremely difficult to overcome in a relationship, in a marriage, but mostly everything else is manageable. Don't let anyone tell you you can't work something out. So as you can see, there isn't a whole lot of concrete advice in the Bible as far as where exactly to look or who to trust with arranging your marriage, because we all have different preferences and different goals, so we all need different people. Oh, and there are also no time frames in the Bible. Hey, I knew my wife for 6 months before we decided to get married, and we've been happily married for almost 9 years now. I say this because some people go through their honeymoon phase as boyfriend and girlfriend still, and by the time the real issues come up, they're trying to fix things through texts, because of course they don't live together yet. And I'm not encouraging anyone to just move in with each other. Talk to your parents or pastors or mentors about the best path forward when it comes to a decision like that. They will most often have great advice. You just have to be honest with them and then, of course, actually follow through. So now that you know that even if you got married to a complete stranger, you could have a happy, long-lasting marriage, you want my advice for finding the one for you. I have 4 tips for you. Number 1, look for someone you enjoy being with. And I think that this also includes age range, because even if it might seem like it doesn't matter now, it might matter in the future. So it's something you should think about. Number 2, you have to be honest with yourself. If looks are somewhat important to you, then they just are. You decide for yourself and then you just move on. That doesn't make you shallow or anything. It's just your personal preference. And then something that I've heard quite often is that the older you get, the less options you have. So, you just have to think about it. Maybe if you're in your 40s still looking for a spouse, you might just have less options because they might have married younger. I don't know. I think there's some truth to that. Number 3. Look for character traits rather than circumstances. And I have a few examples of what I mean by this. First example, if someone isn't making a lot of money, or if they're not in a financially optimal situation or circumstance currently, are they a hardworking person? Because even if they're not there yet, if they're a hardworking person, they will be there at some point. Second example, even if you don't follow this person around and you don't know exactly, are they a consistent person? Do they do the things that they say they're going to do? Again, that's a trait rather than just, one-time event kind of thing. Third example, even if you won't know all the things someone believes at this current point in time, can you talk to them and disagree on something with them? Or do you feel like you just have to avoid certain kind of talks or topics? I think that's important. Do they listen to you? And then this would be another trait. Even if you're not yet technically together, are they still respectful of you? Another example of a trait to look for, in my opinion, nobody's perfect, but are they interested in still growing? Because a teenager or even a 20-something who's already set in their ways, I think is still a very incomplete person, in my opinion. So these are just traits to look for. Are they consistent? Are they respectful? Can you disagree with them? And are they hardworking, kind of consistent as well? And are they still interested in growing and developing as a person? I think that those traits are more important than whatever the person's current circumstances are, because all things pass, but those character traits, I think, will help them develop, and them personally, and then as a relationship, into something better. And my tip number 4 for having a successful, long-lasting marriage is that you have to know in your heart or in your mind, whatever you decide with, that going into this marriage, that this is for life. If you have a plan B going in, then you will not be fully invested in your plan A. So if your thought is, and mindset is, well, I'll just get a divorce, or I'll try this out, see how it goes. So that would just be my advice. Those would be my tips for finding the one. And now, it's definitely true that you might click with someone more or have more or less chemistry with someone at first. So some relationships might require more or less work, but these things don't determine longevity, which I think is the point in marriage, to have a long-lasting marriage. They're just factors. And either way, all successful relationships will have some hardships, and they all require some effort, like with the diet and exercise example from earlier. So as you can probably tell, I personally don't think that there's a single option for you out there out of the billions of people that there is in the world. I'm kind of a math guy, and so the odds that you would find that one specific person are pretty slim anyways. But do I believe that my wife and I are perfect for each other? All I know is that she's perfect for me, and if I'm not perfect for her, I can just work on it and problem solved.
But you are!
So as the title of the video says, you might not be married now, but you might be at some point. So I hope this video kind of helps. So thank you so much for joining me on this video. If you have any questions, comments, or anything you want to contribute, please let me know. And I would also appreciate suggestions for future videos or future topics. And like I said, you could find me through the YouTube comments of this video or our website if you just listen to the podcast. But I think that's it for now from me. Till next time, God bless you.
I love you, baby.
Does that make sense?